Welcome to this week's episode of Married and Broke. Today we are talking about combining finances, or if you should, if you shouldn't, the different approaches, all things involved with when you get married, how you're going to manage your money together.
Yeah, pros and cons, what you should do, what you shouldn't do.
What should we do, Emma?
We should get started.
Let's get started.
Let's get started.
So this week we had a couple of interesting conversations because we've been struggling.
I wouldn't say struggling.
Struggling. The struggle is real, Emma.
I wouldn't say struggling.
Yes, struggling.
Okay.
Not struggling. What would you call it?
I don't know.
Arguing? Fighting? Bantering?
We probably banter more. I wouldn't say we argue too much about, we don't have like crazy arguments about money.
Right. But for context, when we got married 6 years ago, we made the decision to put all of our money together in one joint checking account.
Yeah. So we've always sort of approached money from the what's mine is yours approach. But there's all kinds of other approaches. And there was like an article that I found that went through all the different approaches. And so we kind of wanted to have an episode all about that today, kind of walking you through our approach and like what we've always done, this kind of what's mine is yours, fully joining, and then maybe some of the different approaches.
Right. Because we've both been having some guilt this week.
Yes, we've realized, when we joined money, I don't think we've had too much of an issue just in general, like joining the money, because we got married, we met young, got married young. And I feel like we started adult life together and like grew our money, like starting off together, right? It's not like we were like two very separate individuals with like, set habits and things. So I think we naturally fell into the what's mine is yours.
Right.
And it's worked for the most part, but where we always fall into that like little bit of issue and controversy is that we have slightly different spending habits.
Yes. Our issue is our discretionary spending.
Correct.
We don't have a problem with paying the bills and doing the stuff we need to pay for. But the problem is that up until this point in our life, we've always basically been breaking even.
Yes. And we're in a place where we're really trying to save money, but we're also, again, just with where we're at with how much money we make and with how expensive life is, we don't have a ton of extra money, especially if we want to save money.
Right. We're trying to put basically 100% of our extra money to savings right now because that's how breaking even we are. So we're not accounting for any like fun money, any spending on things we want. And so, but the problem is we don't act like that. Our actions aren't in line with that right now.
Yeah. And I have a little bit of a harder time with not spending that little bit of extra money, just with our spending habits and just kind of our differences in spending.
But I don't either, because I also spent $100 or so this month at least. And, I wasn't planning on that, but I had things that were like, oh, I could use that. That'd be really nice. And I should just do it.
Yeah. I know. I feel like for you, it might be slightly easier to be frugal because there's less of those like little things for you that I think add up. Whereas I have just those like little spending things, or clothes is a big one for me. It's easy at the beginning of the month for me to say I'm not going to buy any clothes or those kind of little extra things. But then I just always end up doing it because once I'm in it, I'm just a slightly more impulsive, I think, than you.
Yeah. And you just have a natural habit where we both work from home. So on the weekends you get pent up and you get a little bit bored because you don't have anything to do and you want to just get out of the house. And the easiest thing for you to go do is to go shop.
Yeah. Shopping has kind of become my hobby in a way.
Right.
It's my way to, kind of relax from the work week and get out of the house. And yeah.
But the problem is, as a couple trying to save for a house or something like that, that's the hard part.
Yeah. So we've had this conversation recently over the last few weeks of just like how we approach that discretionary, that like extra money, or like,
it's like, should we try to account for it so that psychologically we're more happy. Like, do we cut back our savings? Right now we're putting about $1,000 a month in our savings, which is a decent chunk.
Yeah.
And we could make that more like 600 or 500. And then we have, $200 each or $250 each or somewhere around there to actually spend on things we want, or 150 or somewhere that sweet spot.
Yeah. And and then what's kind of led to this conversation is that we've even thought about this idea of like, well, do we need something separate?
Right. Do we each need our own individual accounts that either our fund money goes into so it can build up if we don't spend it, and we can actually physically see a number of how much discretionary spending we each have? Or do we separate our finances and put money towards our mortgage and bills into we each pay towards our joint checking account where that stuff gets paid, and do it that way? So there's just like all these different ways you can do it. We're not really sure what to do, but it just got us thinking about like, what are the pros and cons of each of these different ways of doing it? Is it worth trying to do that? That's what kind of sparked the idea for this episode.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the different approaches to combining money or, separating, or there's kind of that little bit of in between. So we're going to talk about the different approaches, the pros and cons, and then just share a little bit about our experience with what we've done and maybe thoughts on the other ways and things like that. So that's what today is going to be about. Okay, so starting with the first approach, which is what's mine is yours. And this is what we have always done. This is where we are like fully combining. We don't have anything that is
We
separate.
literally do not have any other accounts besides our personal checking account and some savings accounts.
Yeah, everything is combined. So there are, at least based on this article, that talks about some like pros and cons with it. So Mitchell, do you have any thoughts on like with how we've been doing things with this kind of what's mine is yours? What's been kind of pros and cons for you?
Well, just what we've been talking about starting this episode off. I mean, pros, managing the money has been super simple because I only have to go into one account and track all the transactions off of that. And again, that just makes it super simple. I can literally see how much money is coming in one spot. It's basically nice to look at one account and say, okay, we have enough money for the different things coming out of there. It's just at a glance, can double check if we have enough money in there.
Yeah.
And then like, that's really nice. So
Right.
Simplicity of the budgeting has been really nice with that.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's those things like we talked about where it's like, it's hard to tell what we have individually without using like some sort of app or different way of piece of paper and like doing that to keep track of what I spend and add it up constantly. So like, it would be nice. So yeah, that's kind of one of the cons where it's like, it's hard to keep track what we each can spend individually on things we want to spend on. So it's that fun money.
Yeah. It's just that extra money. Like we're great at just like, again, that what's mine is yours. I feel like for me, just our relationship in general feels very what's mine is yours. I think we've always had that approach to not just money. I think we share a lot of our life together. We're not really like two separate people with two separate lives, and then we're just kind of married and come together. Like we live a lot of our life of this, like what's mine is yours.
Even with our belongings too. Cause like I have an iPad that I use for work sometimes, but like I 100% let you use it. It's like, I don't really care. Like we both just share it with our laptops, with our whatever. It's like, you'd use it as much as I use it. And it's not like this is my laptop, don't touch it. Or
even with like chores and things, we don't really like split chores. There's like some things that you just maybe tend to do more often, but like a lot of our life is naturally just, and our relationship is, I think, though, what's mine is yours. So I feel like naturally
we're very team based.
We're very team based.
Whoever is available to do the things that needs to get done can do it. Whoever isn't, like we don't really have any pent up resentment towards that or whatever.
Yeah. So I feel like,
do you have pent up resentment?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. So I feel like naturally with money, then the what's mine is yours just came very naturally. So I feel like for us, that's, a pro in the fact that it's just naturally what we do. And then also I think I'm just not very involved with money. Just, growing up getting older naturally. I've never been really big on the finances, whereas you are good at it and enjoy it and just kind of naturally do it. So I think having like one person doing it also, it kind of, you know, like what you said, like you jump in and you only have to worry about one account because you naturally just do it. So
right.
I would see that as a pro because again, just how a relationship works, you know, like it's kind of a pro. In another sense though, I do think that hypothetically, if we had more separate things and I actually had to take more responsibility for stuff, I would maybe learn to be slightly more independent and have more autonomy with money because I've never had that. Because again, we met young, got married young.
And I do all the money.
And you do all the money and you just take care of it, which I'm fine with. Like, I'm not someone who's like, oh, like, I hate that you do all the money and I feel like I don't have control over it. I'm like, go ahead. You do it.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. I'm happy to just like go to, you know, do my job and the money comes rolling in and that's that.
Give me my debit card and let me go shop.
I don't shop that much. I feel like everyone's going to think that I'm like.
She's not a shopaholic. It's not that bad.
Everyone's going to think I'm a shopaholic and I'm not. I'm not that bad.
And when I say go shopping, it's like $20 here and there.
Right. Again, like I am not someone who can spend a lot of money at once. You can. See, this is our spending differences. It's like I have like little things that add up over time, but if I ever were to spend more than like $100, it would like send me into a panic. Whereas you don't buy a lot of little things at once, but you might like
I spend $100 at a time.
Yeah, drop like $1,000 on a camera, like it's nothing.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
So anyway, with the what's mine is yours, I feel like again those kind of pros and cons. Our biggest con is really just this kind of money guilt.
Yeah, guilt with we just don't feel like we have the money to spend on things, so then we just feel guilty anytime we do spend money on things.
Yeah, but other than that, I feel like there's been a lot of cons. Like I do think
cons or pros.
Pros. Oh my gosh, did I say cons?
Yeah, you did.
Oh my gosh, no. I think there's a lot of pros for couples, especially. I just think it really does like bring you together as a couple.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think so. What's the next one? What's the next one here?
So the next one is now the opposite. So yours and theirs. So this is where you really just kind of divide and conquer and like my money is my money. Yours is yours. You like split up the bill. So maybe, you know, let's say you take, I don't know.
Well, it would just be my income and you take your income and then we both have to equally pay each thing, or you take the mortgage and I take everything else.
You like split it up. So like, it's like, oh, I ordered like, okay, mortgage is coming out of mine. Whereas like the other bills is maybe coming out of yours.
Right.
But it's all split. There's no real, you have like your separate accounts. You just kind of make decisions on like who's paying for what.
Now, would it be, do you think if we did this, would we want to equally split all of the payments? Because right now, that's the problem. I think that would be the problem with this approach right now, is that you make about 70% of our income and I make about 30% of our income.
Yeah.
Because I'm slowly growing into a new venture right now.
So that's where the next approach will come in, is it talks about proportionate. So it's not necessarily like equally split. It's all based on how much each of you bring in. So,
right. So I think the problem with the yours and them, especially if you did it very like divvy up all the bills, it's basically like your roommates. That's how I imagine that one is like the roommate approach. If you basically consider your finances like she's her entity, I'm my entity, and we have to divide the rent, we have to divide the bills, we have to divide all that. This is this approach. If you want to do that, I mean, that can work. I mean, because then
it can work.
Because then, like, and for instance, if we did this, you would have a ton of discretionary spending that you could spend on whatever you want or save or do whatever you want with. And I would be in debt like crazy right now. So that'd be the hard part for me. But that also would probably kick my butt in gear a little bit harder to figure out ways to make more money, to start driving Ubers or whatever the heck I got to do.
Right. So there's that. And they talk about too, where especially, I think this works really well for like two different types of situations. I think if you are just very independent people and you're both cool with that.
Yeah.
Like yes, that's a good way to do it. Like sometimes I think it said like sometimes sharing isn't caring. So like if it causes issues and you're just very independent people and that works for you, cool. And also if you get married when you're a little bit older, I think they mentioned this too. And like you're already just like very established in like your own, you know, the money that you make and like your bills and how you spend things. So sometimes that also works well too. If you're already just very established, independent
that would
people.
make sense, where it's like we already have this whole system on our each on our own figured out.
Yeah, let's just keep it going.
Right, and then just pay for what we need to pay for. That would make sense to me.
Yeah. So that's kind of the situations where, at least with this article, how it talks about, you know, couples that might work for. But I don't know if I could do it.
It would be a lot of learning for you because you would have to then, again, well, it's either I would end up doing double duty of budgeting because I'd have to budget for you and me individually, or you have to learn how to do it.
Just like how you said, it would kind of have to, it'd kick your butt into gear to like make more money. It would kick my butt into gear in being more involved in
seeing the money that goes out.
Seeing the money that goes in and out. So again, I do think that there, you know, hypothetically, I could see a pro for me doing this way is I've never been a very independent person. So I feel like that would force me to learn a little bit more of that independence and autonomy. But with our relationship and just how we function, I don't know if I could do it because I don't see us as two separate people.
Right. I mean, that's the thing with us is that we don't want to like sit and see each other struggle. Like you would feel bad because I would be like, oh my God, I have no money to spend on anything.
Right.
And you have like, here, have a, or it would be a thing where like, I'd be asking you to pay for things for me, you know, like whether it's if we go out to eat, it's like, oh yeah, you can get the check. Or if it's like, hey, Emma, can you buy me this thing that I really want? Cause I don't have any money for it. Like, that would just feel, I won't say degrading, but like, you know.
Yeah. But I also would like 100% do it because like what you said, like I want you to be happy in things. Yeah.
That's where we are okay with the fact that like right now my income is lower.
Yeah. But I know that you would do the same thing for me if the tables were turned, if I was like pursuing a more, you know, creative career that I wasn't making as much money or it was not super stable, like you would do the same thing for me. So I feel like just that I can't get around and probably why we don't do it like completely separate.
Right.
Because I
do see the cases where it would make sense for those like individuals that are very individual.
Exactly. So if I
because as a married couple, I mean, you don't have to mix your finances if that's not your thing. Or I don't know if maybe you had a bad relationship with money, or let's say if maybe you get married and one of you has a bunch of debt. I mean, you don't want to combine that necessarily, even just in case like, God forbid someone dies, then you carry the debt. I don't know. There's that whole like line of that stuff that could be a problem, but I don't know.
Yeah. So even though we do the what's mine is yours and yours is mine, again, not everybody, I don't think everyone has to do that. I don't think that's like the best way to do it. It works for us and just how we function. But yeah, I mean, I could definitely see cases for the keeping it separate and how that could make people's lives easier.
Right. So the next one is proportionate budgeting.
Yes.
So this would be where, so like in our case, if you made 70% of the money and I made 30% of the money, you would basically take on 70% of the bills and I would take on 30% of the bills.
Yes. So it's proportionate to what each of you bring in.
And this would still involve, does it say it still involves like separate accounts? So like I have an account, you have an account, we have a joint account, we put that 70 and 30 into? Yeah.
So this is where you're starting to get into more of that mixed thing where you're not necessarily like completely separate, but you're not like totally combined.
You'd probably have like 3 checking accounts.
Yeah.
Where you'd have a joint one for all the bills that you each pay your proportionate income, or not income, but you pay your proportionate amount in for bills. And then you would each have your just remainder of what you have.
Right. So then what's left over is...
It would be closer to equal, but I would still have much less than you would have. But that's kind of fair because I'm not bringing in a ton.
Exactly. So which
could be a decent way to go because Because then it's still one of those things where it would kind of kick my butt into gear of like, I don't have as much money saved aside, but I still have some. And if I want more, the more I make, the more it equals out.
Yeah. So I think this is for those couples where if it's not like it's the total what's mine is yours doesn't really work, but also it's not, you know, the like completely separate, also not a fan of. This is kind of that like intermediate. So
yeah, it's good for those people that have, if one of you is a high earner or someone is making less, which, and again, I got to know what the other ones are. We're not there yet, but that's where I think this one, without knowing what the other ones are yet, but I think this one could maybe work the best for us in our current situation.
Yeah, because it's that keeping it equal. It's more that like you each, you know, pay your fair share, but then you also that leftover money is then you kind of still have that little bit of separation of like, okay, now this is my money and that's left over and I can kind of choose what I want to do with it without having that, you know, guilt of the full share.
Right. Yeah. So that could be an option to look at. What other cons can you think of for this one?
I just wonder if, I don't know, like just that power struggle or resentment with the who makes more could be an issue. Do you think, right?
I mean, like if it was super outbalanced, like if you were making like 10 grand a month or something like that, and I was making like 2 grand a month, I could see that. But like, since we are fairly close, like it's still a pretty unfair split if you're 70 and I'm 30, which like hopefully mine increases soon. But, you know, so like if that were to continue for a long time, but since we know mine's probably going to be increasing over the next year, like it wouldn't be that bad.
Right.
We at least it would be nice. I just think it'd be nice because then it's like, and we'd have to do the math to figure out like exactly what we would each end up with. Mm-hmm. But it could be a good starting point.
Yeah. I mean, I could definitely say it'd be a good starting point. But yeah, like the biggest con I could think of is like what you said, like we're somewhat equal. So it wouldn't be like too much of a disproportionate, but I feel like if you really had a totally disproportionate.
But if you think about like how we're doing our money now, like we're essentially doing this, we're just not separating out the remainder because you are carrying a lot of the weight financially for us right now.
Yeah.
So it's not like it really changes that in our like relationship dynamic because like with the what's mine is yours, like if you have a discrepancy, like it's just baked in.
Right. Because again, our biggest discrepancy is just that like leftover money.
Yeah.
Leftover money. The problem is that like without, you know,
right now we don't have leftover money.
We don't really have leftover money. Yeah. That's the issue we have is we don't really have leftover money because we have that thousands going to say, you know, that $1,000 going into our savings and nothing really left over. So then that's where that kind of guilt comes in because I kind of want that little bit of flexibility to spend a little bit extra on some things.
I do too. I mean, I also like to spend on certain things. There's different things I want to get and do. Like I got into 3D printing, which is like, there's a lot of things you can buy and like you need more filament for it and whatever. And it's like, I don't even feel like I can spend $15 to buy another roll of filament for my 3D printer. So it's like, there's things like that where it's just like, I want to
But then I spend like a couple $100s on clothes and then I feel bad because then you didn't really spend that extra money. But with this,
proportionally
though, if we were to do that method, like because I'm making more, I would probably have a little more extra to spend than you.
Right. So that's someone to look into. That's the one I'm kind of leaning towards, at least figuring out the math for and like seeing like
what that would
look like. It would end up with.
Yeah.
Because obviously it's not like doing this is going to make more money. Like we're obviously still going to be pretty close to breaking even, but just seeing like, and again, if we scaled back our savings a little bit, it's like, would I get $25 and you would get like 75 or, you know, how that would play out.
Right. It'd be interesting to see what that would actually look like. And I would be curious to see if that helps resolve any of this kind of money guilt.
Yeah.
That we have.
Makes me want to do more side hustles or I don't know.
Yeah.
We can't do that though. We've got enough as it is. But.
Yeah. But it would be interesting though to see what that would do. So then the other way is similar. Again, it's kind of a hybrid version, but this is raw contribution. So it's a flat amount that each is contributing.
So how would that work? Do you understand that one? Do we need to read it? The raw contribution method is pretty straightforward. Each partner chips in a flat amount and keeps any remainder of their paycheck separate. You can include any shared savings goals within your budget, such as saving for a trip together. But the main idea here is an equal or at least static contribution towards shared expenses. So here's an example just to break this down. So for example, if you make let me say it like this. So if I were to make $3,500 a month and you made $5,600 a month, and you've calculated that our shared bills come out to $4,600 a month, each would contribute $2,300.
So we'd split it.
So we just split what our bills. So that kind of would be. So this is kind of what we were saying. What would happen if we did the separate accounts and we split it fairly?
Yes.
This is kind of that. So then, just to jump back here, just to make sense of it. So with the yours and mine, I'm sorry. So like the separate, you have your account, I have my account. How does that work with divvying up bills?
That's saying
it's not necessarily equal, but it's like you get the mortgage, I get all the utilities, and whatever that ends up being, as long as we can each cover them,
yes,
then it's good. So that's kind of the separate.
Yeah.
But not necessarily equal.
Correct.
This would be like
separate and equal.
Separate and equal contribution. So then you would end up with your extra fund money. I would end up with barely any fund money.
Correct.
So what do you think about this one? We kind of talked about it a little bit with that other one.
I feel like it's similar to the other one, but it probably might feel less like disproportionate, because again, like if I'm.
Yeah, I just don't think this one would work for us.
No.
Because again, we already talked about it. If I'm making 30% and you're making 70%, you would
basically have no money.
I would have no money and I would go broke.
So those are, at least with this article, those are the 4 methods that I talked about. And I'm not sure if there's more out there. I'm sure there is.
If there's any more out there, let us know in the comments. If you do something different or if you have an opinion, just let us know. We want to hear from you.
Love to hear. So again, it's kind of this totally together, totally separate, some hybrid versions. So what are your thoughts? What are your wrap up thoughts for us?
I think it's definitely interesting to think about these different ways and how it would work. I feel like for us, we would definitely need to be somewhere in that proportionate. I think that would be, it's like you each have your own accounts. We have a joint account and we do proportionate. I almost think we could do it backwards though, where it's like we keep our money coming into the joint account so that there's always enough money in there for bills just in case. And then we pull out that extra money into separate accounts. I think that could be a good way to do it.
That's what I was thinking. I think it's not necessarily it's not totally the proportionate thing.
Like it's a mix between what's mine and yours, but also proportionate. But I think if we took the concept of the proportionate, where it's like you get based on how much you made, like your fund, like instead of just saying like we each get like $100, like it's you get whatever that 70% of that would be, and I get the 30%, maybe.
Yeah, or something. It'd be interesting to try. I think for me, because I think I can. For me, it's really easy at the beginning of the month to be like, yep, I just need to be frugal this month. But I just know that I have a really hard time with that.
So then my question is like, what could we do for you so that you, like, let's say we set aside fund money. Like, how are you going to know what fund money you have left? Like, is that hard for you, do you think, to do?
Yeah. I think that's where it gets tricky. So I feel like that's where having just that part, having separate accounts could maybe be good, because then it forces me to be more intentional and have to keep track of what I spend there.
And I wonder if there's a way, it would be kind of annoying to do this through a bank, because you can usually at a bank, you can have as many savings accounts or like little buckets of savings.
Right.
Like if we were to put our fund money into savings accounts, we don't have to sit and like Like that'd be hard because we would have to transfer the money back when we want to spend it. But we at least could look and see easily without having to go and open 2 checking accounts. You know what I'm saying?
There's always cash too.
I just would pull cash out and save
Pull
it
cash
up.
out.
But then again, it's that whole like, it's annoying to go to the bank and put the cash in if we want to pay with our debit card, and that whole, like we start with that. There's just like this like pile of random cash that we've accumulated from people giving us money.
We do.
That we
yeah.
we literally don't even deposit because it's like annoying to go to the bank. But
yeah,
so that would be the tricky part with doing cash,
is having to go to the bank to pull out that cash all the time.
But it would still also be like we could do it on our phone to like transfer the money from our savings when we want to spend. So it's kind of that give and take with that. Now, again, we could just get off our butts and go to the bank and open 2 checking accounts.
We could.
But it's a process. It would take us.
It is.
It's that getting the resistance or whatever at first with that.
Yeah.
But
so I don't know. I feel like, like overall, I feel like we have a really good process. It just is that little bit of just figuring out that fun money, that kind of extra discretionary. So I think that's what we need to work on, and we need to figure out what works.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun to at least do the math of our budget with the proportionate and just see like what we would each have to be responsible for, and if we're left over with any, or just how that would work. So I think that's definitely where we will go.
Yes. So again, let us know what you do, or, your thoughts on these, or if there's any other approaches that you've heard of or you think would work.
Yeah, any feedback. We're open to feedback. We're open to different methods. I mean, we're still figuring that out. So please leave any comments, leave any suggestions. You can find us, if you're watching the video version, leave a comment on YouTube. If you're listening to the audio version, you can find us on Instagram at Married and Broke Podcast. And we would just love to connect with you guys. So leave any questions, leave any comments. Again, we're hoping to get to the point where we can have a Q&A session of this, related maybe or not, but just to add more content to this podcast. So if you're really enjoying this podcast, it would mean the most wherever you're listening or watching to subscribe, follow us, leave a like, leave a comment, whatever you want to do, reviews on Apple Podcast or wherever it is. That would super help us out if you're getting any value out of this. We would super appreciate that, so we can help other people out too.
Yeah. And with that, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.
Bye-bye.